turn now at 8 to our conversation around the drink-drive limit. I'm quite surprised actually here at the Wake Up Call on BBC Radio Kent to learn the number of drink-drive deaths has reached its highest level since 2009, according to provisional estimates. In the most recent figures for here in Kent, more than 200 people were arrested for drink and drug driving in Kent in December alone. Let's discuss this now with Steve Horton, the Casualty Reduction Manager at Kent County Council Highways, and Jeanette Miller, the Managing Director of the Jeanette Miller Solicitors. And Steve, if I could start with you. I mean, we've been discussing whether we need to be like Scotland on this one, where we need to have zero tolerance and say, if you're getting behind the wheel, then it's very, very simple. It's black and white. You simply don't drink at all.
Wouldn't that be great? I absolutely agree with that. I think that's, drink drive casualties are the most avoidable casualties of anything on our roads. Nobody forces you to have a drink and then drive. So it's a choice that people make. Sometimes they get a bit caught out, I understand that. But generally speaking, these things don't have to happen. So for my money, it's always been my professional view, my personal view indeed, that drink drivers are bad people and we shouldn't be accepting them.
Well, we don't accept them though, do we? I mean, we do punish them where we can find them. So where are we going wrong?
Well, I think, you hit the nail on the head pretty much. It's a combination of education. It's a combination, combining that with enforcement. And, if the fear of detection is strong enough, if you think you're going to be caught 100% of the time drink driving, you'll never do it. If you think you're never going to be caught doing it, you're probably always going to do it. So, so the truth is somewhere between those two things, of course. So the reality is we need to be enhancing the fear of detection whilst making sure people are absolutely clear why it's a bad thing to do.
It's a really good point. I'm going to bring Jeanette in on this one because, Jeanette, it's really interesting sort of legally. We've been looking at what they've done in Scotland. They have changed the law, but actually we've been hearing it hasn't reduced the numbers of casualties because of drink driving. Do you think that actually there's no point then in changing the law in this country? It's more about the things that Steve was talking about, education and policing.
I am inclined to agree to an extent with Steve. I believe that education is an absolute priority. I was thinking this morning on how there could be changes to the attitude and information that drivers have, perhaps introducing something like the drink drive rehabilitation course that is a part of the punishment process, but introducing that into driving tests at the beginning of a driver's sort of experience getting on the roads, because the majority of people I speak to, and I speak to the people who are accused of drink driving most of the time, the majority will say, I don't agree with drink driving, I'm completely against drink driving.
Oh.
But yet they've been, not everybody, but a lot of the clients that we speak to have somehow got in a situation without realizing that their alcohol levels will have been over the limit. And I think that is down to a lack of understanding of the metabolic process with alcohol and a lack of education, particularly for many motorists who during their driving training before they've been granted a license just haven't had that information properly relayed to them.
That's really interesting to know, because that makes me think, well, wouldn't it be easier if it's a lack of understanding? It's easy to understand, don't drink if you're driving.
Yeah, I think there are people, don't get me wrong, who clearly do take risks and don't believe that they will be caught, but I would say the majority of people I speak to don't, and it's a case of just not appreciating the dangers of the amounts of the alcohol consumed, the timings of the drinks. We still come across a lot of people who are caught the morning after a night before, thinking they're okay, getting behind the wheel of the car, having no intention to cause any danger or risk to other road users, but unfortunately they just haven't appreciated that the alcohol has yet to leave the system.
Yeah, see, this thing about education is an interesting one because it comes back to money, doesn't it? Who's going to pay for advertising campaigns? Who's going to pay? Is it going to be you at Kent County Council, Steve?
Well, we rely on the government to help us out with that, of course, with national advertising, but we do quite a bit in Kent. We're very fortunate that we're able to spend some of our resource on these sorts of messages. But it's a great shame because, why would we need to spend money on something, as you say, it should be so black and white. The worry really for me is that when we start to apply a limit, we start to think, well, it means it's acceptable to drink something and then drive.
Right.
The stats that we look at will tell us when something is a drink drive crash because someone's over the drink drive limit. What I can't tell you very accurately is how many people are killed and have their lives changed by drivers that have had perhaps one drink or two drinks.
That's really interesting.
Education is clearly important, but I think if you're going to educate people about the limit, it's really difficult because then you're encouraging people to have something, and who can walk into a pub and ask for 35 micrograms of alcohol, please? The limit is set in such a way that it's really difficult for people to understand. The simplest option is just to take it out of the equation and accept that you shouldn't really be drinking anything if you're going to be driving.
Although it brings me back to the point I made before, Steve, that in Scotland they've done that and it hasn't made any difference.
Well, absolutely, but who knows what it would have been like if the things hadn't changed. I think there is definitely a hardcore of people that know darn well what they're doing when they're out there drinking and driving. Small number, albeit. Lots of people that do get caught out by it. I think what it does do, if we were to reduce our woefully high limit that we have in the UK, or certainly in England, the highest limit across anyone else in Europe, probably one of the highest limits in the whole of the world. If we were to reduce that, then I think it just reinforces the importance of the message that alcohol and driving are a bad mix.
And Steve, Jeanette made a good point. Maybe we need this kind of education to come in at the driving test stage, not as the punitive stage.
Yeah, I agree. We need to be preparing people as best we can, but I do not believe there is a driver anywhere out on our streets that does not understand that mixing alcohol and driving is something that is frowned upon, that you should not do it. The problem is people start to convince themselves that because there's a limit, I can have something and I'll be okay. That's not true.
Jeanette, talking to your clients about all of this, a lot of them you're saying got caught out, which really sort of makes me want to ask a question around policing, because a lot of our guests this morning have said, including Steve actually, if we have more police, if you don't think you're going to get away with it, then you won't do it. I mean, do you think that would stop the number of clients that come through your doors?
I don't actually, because I think that the people who we come across have no intention of going out there most of the time and actually committing offences. So police presence doesn't really link into that. I do think that we are seeing no difference despite the drops in police numbers in the number of people that we speak to. So I think regardless of those reductions in police across the country, I believe arrests are continuing at the same level as they have been for many years.
Thank you both for adding your expertise to the debate this morning. Good to talk to you. That's Jeanette Miller, Managing Director of the Jeffrey Miller's Solicitors, and Steve Horton, Casualty Reduction Manager at Kent County Council Highways.